Okay, I'm Qabsani and I'm going to explain the anatomy of the CNS and the special senses. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Morphologically, the brain is divided into cerebrum, brainstem, and cerebellum. Cerebrum is have two cerebral hemispheres separated by median fissure. This is one of the cerebral hemisphere from the left side. Diencephalon. Diencephalon gives the thalamus and the hypothalamus. The brainstem is divided into midbrain, pons, medulla oblongata, and cerebellum. Embryologically, the brain is divided into the forebrain, midbrain, hindbrain, and each one gives like a division to be developed later. So the forebrain, which is prosencephalon, gives telencephalon and diencephalon. And then the telencephalon and diencephalon each gives the adult derivative to the walls and the cavities on this table. Midbrain or mesencephalon gives the midbrain and the cerebral aqueduct cavity. Hindbrain or rhombencephalon gives metencephalon and myelencephalon, which gives the pons, cerebellum, and medulla. And the upper part of fourth ventricle and the lower part of the fourth ventricle. Each cerebral hemisphere consists of outer gray matter, which is the cerebral cortex. This is the cerebral cortex. Right. So this is cerebral cortex. Gray matter. White matter embedded within the hemisphere, commissural associated with projection fiber. So you have commissurals and in the white matter in the association, projection fibers. Inner gray matter, basal nuclei or ganglia. So this is the inner gray matter. Cavity within the hemisphere, lateral ventricle. This is the lateral ventricle inside the hemisphere itself. Cerebral cortex shows elevation, gyri, and grooves with sulci. Deep sulci are called fissures, and cerebral cortex shows functional areas. Each area contains a group of cells that perform specific functions like speaking and talking and writing. So we will go through this in the next slide. Each cerebral hemisphere is divided into 4 lobes. The frontal lobe, the frontal lobe, the parietal lobe, the occipital lobe, and the temporal lobe. The 4 lobes are named according to the nearby skull bones, according to the anatomy. Each hemisphere has 3 poles: the frontal pole, the temporal pole, the occipital pole. Each hemisphere is divided into 4 lobes by the central sulci, in the posterior ramus of the lateral fissure, and the imaginary line from the parieto-occipital sulcus to the near pre-occipital notch. Here, pre-occipital notch. So from parieto-occipital sulci to the pre-occipital notch. The imaginary line from the posterior ramus to the lateral fissure, posterior ramus of the lateral fissure to the previous line. Posterior ramus of the lateral fissure to the posterior line. So here's the imaginary line. So, imaginary line that divides the brain into the lobes. Each cerebral hemisphere has 3 surfaces: the superior lateral surface, the medial surface, and the inferior surface. Superior lateral surface have lateral sulcus, central sulcus, parietal occipital sulcus. You have lateral sulcus of Salvius. It begins on the inferior surface and extends on the lateral surface between the temporal and frontal lobe, where it divided into 3 rami. Posterior ramus runs backward and upward into the parietal lobe. So this is the posterior ramus of lateral sulcus. Here it is. Anterior horizontal ramus runs forward within the inferior frontal gyrus. So this is the anterior ramus of lateral sulcus. Here it is. And anterior ascending ramus, which is right here. Anterior ascending ramus runs upward within inferior frontal gyrus. Central sulcus of Rolando, it extends from the superior border a little behind the midpoints between the frontal and occipital poles. It ends slightly above the middle of the posterior ramus of lateral sulcus. So the central sulcus of Rolando, here it is, central sulcus of Rolando. Parieto-occipital sulcus between the parietal and occipital lobes. Parietal and occipital lobes, we have parieto-occipital sulcus. Here it is. Parieto-occipital sulcus, there it is. Sulci and gyri of the frontal lobes. It shows three main sulci. Pre-central sulcus, which is parallel to and one finger in front of the central sulcus. So the pre-central sulcus is here, right here, pre-central sulcus. And superior frontal sulcus, which is right here, superior frontal sulcus. And inferior frontal sulcus, which is right here. So the sulci are the grooves in between the gyri, and shows four gyri: pre-central gyrus, which is in between the central sulcus and the pre-central sulcus, and superior, middle, and inferior frontal gyri, which is divided by the inferior frontal sulcus and superior frontal sulcus. The inferior frontal gyrus is divided into orbital, and triangular, and opercular gyrus. The sulci and gyri of the temporal lobe, it shows two main sulci: superior temporal sulcus, which is right here, the inferior temporal sulcus. Those sulci gives us the three gyruses: the superior, middle, and inferior temporal gyruses. And that's it for the temporal lobe. The insula, or island of Rayleigh, it is a buried part of the cerebral cortex in the bottom of the lateral sulcus, which is right here. So this is the insula. It is conical in shape. The base is surrounded by the circular sulcus. The circular sulcus here. And the apex directed below, here. It is divided by the central sulcus. Central sulcus of the insula into three gyri, three short gyri, and long gyrus, which is posteriorly positioned. Function, it is present in humans only. It gives us self-awareness, basic emotions, consciousness, cognitive functions, helps us in motor control, hemostatic functions, and interpersonal experiences. Sulci and gyri of the parietal lobe, it shows two main sulci: the post-central sulcus here, and the intraparietal sulcus. Intraparietal sulcus, right here. It shows five gyri, which is the post-central gyrus, right here, and the superior and inferior parietal lobule. The inferior lobule is further divided into supra marginal gyrus and angular gyrus. Use a sense of speech. Sulci and gyri of occipital lobe. It shows transverse lateral occipital sulcus, transverse occipital sulcus, which is right here. It divides the lateral surface of the occipital lobe into superior and inferior gyri. The medial surface. We have sulci and gyri in the medial surface as well. So we have the callosal sulcus, cingulate sulcus, right here after the callosal sulcus, subparietal or suprasplenal sulcus, subparietal sulcus right here, parieto-occipital sulcus, and calcarean sulcus. Okay, so the gyri, cingulate gyrus, we have it right here after the corpus callosum, which is the connection between the right and left hemisphere. The cuneus is posteriorly positioned, precuneus in front of the cuneus, and lingual gyrus posteriorly and inferiorly positioned. The inferior surface divided by the stem of the lateral sulcus into orbital surface here and centurial surface right here. So the orbital surface have sulci, the olfactory sulcus and orbital sulcus. Gyri, we have gyrus rectus right here and orbital gyri right here. The tentorial surface is separated from the cerebellum by tentorium cerebelli. The sulci in it is the hippocampal sulcus right here and collateral sulcus right here. This is the tentorial surface of the inferior surface of the brain. And renal sulcus separate the uncus from the rest of the temporal lobe. The occipitotemporal sulcus, which is right here, the occipitotemporal sulcus, lies between the medial and lateral occipital temporal gyrus. Lateral and medial occipitotemporal gyrus. Gyri, the lingual gyri or lingual gyrus below the calcarean sulcus. Here is the lingual gyrus. The uncus, which is right here, in parahippocampal gyrus, and occipital temporal gyrus,